approaching, and Jeremy is excited for the upcoming season. Not for the leaves changing. We're in Florida. The leaves don't change. Not for the weather cooling, although that will be nice. It's been so hot. Today, Jeremy will tell us why we should be excited about the rapid approach of the upcoming season. Please welcome Jeremy.
Go, 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 go. Touchdown! We're the champions. My team is champions. It's been so long. Can't tell you how excited I am to finally be champions. First time since 2001. What team? Well, it wasn't my Steelers. They didn't win the Super Bowl last year. And it wasn't my Gators either. Unfortunately, they lost to Alabama in the national championship game, or in the SEC championship. This was my fantasy team, a team I had way more work and sweat put into. But you don't think I'm that excited about my fantasy football team? Oh. I am absolutely so excited. And if you don't understand that, maybe you've never played fantasy football. Maybe you don't even know that much about fantasy football. Maybe I should tell you something about fantasy football. Did you know that according to trenchfantasy.com, between 22 to 27 million people are now playing fantasy football? But Jeremy, that is a fantasy website. That research could be inflated because they're trying to pump up the numbers. You're right. So I went to ask.com, a much more mainstream website, and they said the number is more like 30 to 35 million people, and cited one source that said it could be as much as 47 million people playing fantasy football now. How do we decipher those numbers? Let me give you some examples. Most of my fraternity brothers play fantasy football. The guys I play basketball with on Thursday nights are all in fantasy football leagues. And then there's my administrative assistant. She plays in a league with her husband and father, among others. Whether you realize it or not, you probably know someone who plays fantasy football. How does it work? What happens is, leading up to the NFL season, NFL, so you know, is the football league. It also stands for not for long. Leading up to the season, your league gets together and they have a draft. All the players on all the teams in the NFL are available to you. You take turns picking players on those teams. At the end of the draft, every team has a roster of players. Every week of the NFL season, you get to pick some of the players on your roster to play for you. If those players score touchdowns in the games that week, your team scores points. If you score more points than the person you're playing against, the person in your league who's also playing, you win that week. The more wins you get, the more likely you are to make the playoffs. Once you're in the playoffs, as long as you continue winning, maybe you make the championship or even become champions, like moi. So where can one play fantasy football? It used to be, before the internet, we got one person in the league to keep score for us, keep track of who had won and who had lost, settle all the debates, set up the rules. Now, there are websites literally just devoted to fantasy sports. MyFantasyLeague.com, Trench Fantasy. But maybe the easiest place to go to is Yahoo. People go to Yahoo every day. They host free fantasy leagues. So you can get a group of people together, set up your own private league, and have it hosted by Yahoo. They'll keep track of everything for you. If you don't know people who want to play in a fantasy football league with you, you can go and join one of their public leagues. You'll be playing with people all over the country who also wanted to join a fantasy football league. Get a chance to make new friends and experience fantasy football. So when would you do this? Well, as I said, the season is fast approaching, and drafts are already happening for fantasy football. But you can actually get into a league even in times when the season's already begun. Leagues now start pretty much throughout the season. But let's just say, as a for instance, you hate fantasy football. You would prefer a different sport. They have fantasy baseball, fantasy basketball, fantasy hockey, fantasy soccer, fantasy golf. I'll bet they even have fantasy tennis. That's for you, madam. But the one thing I haven't really told you is a why. Why would I want to play fantasy football? What's in it for me? You know, I read an interesting article by John Tonger. He writes for Heretical Ideas magazine, and he's a fantasy football guy himself. And what he found was several reasons people like to play fantasy football. There's the variable reinforcement structure of it. People like to gamble. And this, in a way, is a form of gambling. As much as you do research to try and figure out who to play each week, you're really dependent on what they do. You've got no control over that, so there is certainly an element of gambling in it. You put more time in research, you have a better opportunity to learn some of the things about it, but the newest fantasy football player can beat the most grizzled veteran on any given week, and maybe even for an entire league, largely because of luck. There's also competition. People are looking to get involved in more competitions. Chess, poker can satisfy some of that, but fantasy football gives us another outlet for our competition needs. And of course, camaraderie. Keep in touch with old friends. My fantasy football league is with some of my fraternity brothers. California, New York, Atlanta, they're across the country. But we all post on the message board, we all take part in the draft, we all get a chance to talk trades throughout the year, we keep in touch. But if I had to leave you with one reason why you ought to try fantasy football this year, it would be what Matthew Berry, ESPN's fantasy expert, says. The reason why people play fantasy football is because it's fun. If you're looking for something to do this fall, why not try fantasy football? It's free and it's fun. That's just message.